every empire falls, not with the clash of steel or the roar of an invading army, not with fire and fury, but with a quiet, creeping silence, a final, whispered breath in a dimly lit room. It is in this silence that the true nature of power is revealed. Stripped of crowns, thrones, and titles, what remains of the men who shaped the world? These are the last words of history's greatest ruler spoken, when all worldly authority had faded, and death was the only kingdom left to conquer. Our journey begins in Rome, in the year 14 AD, the city of marble, a testament to one man's will. For over 40 years, he had been its master, its father, its god. Caesar Augustus. He found Rome a city of brick and left it an empire of marble. He commanded legions, read through maps, and held the fate of millions in his hands. But now, he was just an old man, his strength failing, the vast empire he built existing only as a distant murmur beyond his chamber walls. Surrounded by his closest friends and family, those who had witnessed his long and storied life, he saw the sorrow in their eyes. The weight of an era ending hung heavy in the air. As his breathing grew shallow, a faint, almost playful smile touched his lips. He looked at the faces around him, his audience for this final act. And then he asked a simple, profound question. Have I played the part well? Life, for the first Roman emperor, was a grand play. And all of Rome, the entire world he had conquered and ruled, was merely his stage. His last words were not a command, not a decree, but the humble inquiry of an actor seeking applause as the curtain fell. He wasn't an emperor anymore. He was a man reflecting on his performance in the great drama of existence. Let's travel back centuries. To Babylon, 323 BC. The air is thick with spice, wine, and the sweat of a city that has just been conquered. Its new master is a living legend, a man who wept when there were no more worlds to conquer. Alexander the Great, at just 32 years old, he had forged an empire stretching from Greece to India. He was more than a king. He was a force of nature, believed by many to be the son of a god. Yet, after a night of celebration, the unconquerable warrior collapsed, struck down not by a sword, but by a sudden, violent fever. For days, the master of the known world lay helpless, his body betraying him. His generals, the hardened men who had followed him through deserts and over mountains, gathered around his bed, their faces etched with fear and ambition, crowded his vision. The empire, this vast, sprawling entity held together only by his genius, was about to be orphaned. To whom do you leave your empire? They demanded, their voices a mix of grief and greed. Alexander, summoning his last ounce of strength, managed to whisper a single, fateful answer to the strongest. With those 3 words, he unleashed a half-century of war, tearing his own creation apart. He didn't name a successor. He lit a fuse. Was it a final, cynical act of a man who believed no one could replace him, or the ultimate challenge from a warrior who respected only strength? We will never know, but in that moment, Alexander the Great sealed his legend, ensuring his name would be remembered not just for the empire he built, but for the magnificent chaos he left in its wake. Now, we move forward in time to the opulent halls of Versailles in 1715. For 72 years, one man has been the center of this universe. Louis XIV, the Sun King. He was the absolute monarch, the embodiment of the state itself. His reign was so long that he outlived his son and his grandson. Entire generations of European royalty were born and died under his immense shadow. He built Versailles as a golden cage for his nobility and a dazzling monument to his own glory. But now, the sun was setting. Gangrene crept up his leg, a slow and glorious end for a king who had shone so brightly. Courtiers, who had spent their lives orbiting him, now gathered around his deathbed, their faces streaked with tears. Their sobs filled the lavish chamber. The king's eyes fluttered open one last time. He looked at the weeping assembly, not with fear or sadness, but with a kind of regal surprise. "Why do you weep?" he asked, his voice weak but clear. "Did you think I was immortal?" It was the perfect final line for the Sun King, a gentle rebuke to those who had forgotten that even the most powerful of men are still just men. He had played the part of a divine ruler so convincingly that perhaps even he, for a moment, had believed the illusion. In the end, he reminded them all of a simple, humbling truth. Even the sun must set. Let us stand now on a desolate, windswept rock in the middle of the Atlantic. The year is 1821. The island is St. Helena. Here, a man who once held all of Europe in his hand now holds nothing but memories. Napoleon Bonaparte, the emperor who crowned himself, the general whose armies marched from the sands of Egypt to the snows of Moscow. He redrew the map of a continent, rewrote its laws, and haunted the dreams of kings. But his Waterloo had come and gone. Now he was a prisoner, his empire dismantled, his power a ghost. His final days was spent in exile, dictating memoirs, reliving his glories and his failures. As stomach cancer consumed him, the world he had fought so hard to possess began to fade. In his final, delirious moments, his mind drifted back to the three pillars of his life, the three obsessions that had driven him. He whispered a few broken words, a trinity of his soul: France, the army, Josephine, his country, his instrument of power, and the woman he had loved, crowned and divorced. Empire, war, love. These were the things that remained when everything else was stripped away. Then silence. The great storm that had been Napoleon Bonaparte was over. From the halls of Versailles to a lonely island exile, from the marble city of Rome to the fever-drenched bed in Babylon. The stories change, but the ending is always the same. The crown falls. The scepter is laid down. The armies are dismissed. What is left? A man, a memory, and a few final words that echo through history. These last words are not commands to be obeyed, but windows into the soul. They show us that behind the myth of the emperor, the conqueror, the sun king, lies the universal human experience. Augustus, the master administrator, wonders if his life was a good performance. Alexander, the ultimate warrior, throws down one last challenge. Louis, the symbol of divine right, gently mocks the idea of his own immortality. And Napoleon, the romantic hero, clings to the nation, the army, and the love that defined him. They remind us that no matter how high we build our empires, no matter how much power we accumulate, we all face the same final curtain. The great equalizer is not revolution or defeat, but the simple, quiet act of dying. The legacies they left behind of law, of chaos, of culture, of war continued to shape our world. But their final moments remind us that history is not just a grand tale of nations and battles. It is the intimate, personal story of human beings grappling with love, regret, and the profound mystery of their own mortality. And in the end, that is the most powerful story of all. Thank you for watching. If this reflection on history and mortality resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into the past. Every follow helps us continue to uncover the human stories behind the great events of history.